My identity, label abstractly. I am learning to love the skin I'm in.
For me, it was a lot of pop punk, and the earliest band that I really, really connected to was Fall Out Boy when I was probably 11 or 12, and I think it was around the time they released Infinity on High.
Right, okay, so a bit later.
Yeah. And then after that kind of went back and had some other albums to listen to, which is always nice. People are looking at us.
It's okay. So,
I don't know if it's because
stop
they
looking
can
at us,
hear us.
maybe they can.
Sorry, yeah. Yeah, but Fall Out Boy for me was like, it was like a good combination of like complicated lyrics that really talked about quite personal, emotional things, and like stuff that normally people won't really talk about.
Right.
And then also this sort of high energy, like you could sing it really loud in the car when you're driving, and that's kind of how I learned to sing harmonies and stuff, listening to
me too.
Fall Out Boy.
Pop punk bands, emo bands, all the guys that sing really high.
Yeah.
Good for girl vocals.
Yeah, a lot of, exactly, that blows my mind now when I go through and actually play out those melodies and realize they're hitting like high B's and high C's, like it's nothing.
Yeah.
And it's quite impressive, but that was just the style at the time.
Yeah, totally.
So you totally take it for granted. But yeah, Panic at the Disco, and we used to listen to like bands, New Zealand bands like Goodnight Nurse.
Yeah.
Were a huge influence. And that's why it's cool to be back now doing that genre.
Yeah.
Because I kind of...
And making it new as well.
Yeah, it's sort of, it has come back into fashion, so to speak. And a lot of younger kids are rediscovering all of those bands 10 years later, which is crazy. A lot of the OPENSIDE fans, I feel like they're going through and they experience things very similar to the way that I did when I was their age. Yeah, it's really cool.
So those bands like Fall Out Boy and Panic at the Disco, were you probably around like 10, 11 when that? What about younger than that? Like growing up, not even starting your music career, even maybe not even thinking about a career in music. What kind of music were you surrounded by growing up?
Before that, it's always what your parents are exposing you to. My dad was really big into the Smiths.
Cool.
So I listened to a lot of the Smiths, and then into my teenage years as well. And also like songwriter types like Big Runner and Carole King. Right. Who even as a young person, it sort of made me want to write songs because I used to have really bad trouble getting to sleep when I was a kid, and I couldn't get to sleep without listening to something, otherwise I'd get like scared of whatever monsters.
It's a good distraction.
Yeah, and I used to listen to Big Runner albums and Carole King albums when I was falling asleep, and it was really comforting.
Yeah, so there were some women musicians in there. Like, even with your pop punk influences, did you ever listen, like, was Paramore a big thing?
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Even though around that genre, they were kind of one of the only really
They were in the forefront.
Yeah, and then came like Hey Monday and We Are the In crowd? They have a girl, don't they? Or is that a different band?
I sort of, a little bit later, I kind of like deviated then, but Paramore was definitely a big influence on our band, my young bands when I was like 13.
Yeah.
And then even now with OPENSIDE, definitely for the other members of the band, like Paramore was a big influence on them because they're like 4 years younger than me.
Yeah.
But so for them, when we were liking that music when I was like 12, that was like in 2006, that was like what's cool.
Yeah.
But for them, like 3 or 4 years later, it was kind of a bit more niche.
And totally.
They had a slightly different experience of it, but that's why we ended up being a band, even though we had this age difference, was because we had this mutual love of pop punk.
Yeah. That's cool. So it's kind of interesting because I feel like there probably weren't that many women around. There weren't many women around in pop punk, so you weren't really even subconsciously like being exposed to a lot of women in that genre being the main influence for your music. Do you now that you're a bit older, do you seek out like women influences, or are you like conscious of that at all, or are you kind of just like whatever comes to?
I think you do become more conscious of it, partly being older and partly just like the cultural context that we're in now.
Yeah, because now you are a front woman, and you know what.
And that diversity element, and also the topics that people talk about, like a lot of traditional emo was really like a white boy problems 101 and it's kind of, you can laugh about it now, but at the time like that was seen as the be all end all, like this girl, I liked her, but then she wouldn't call me, and now I'm really, really depressed. I wrote a song about it. And there's some problematic content in there, and it's just being able to like identify that and still kind of appreciate it for what it is. And in terms of seeking out like diversity, you know, it's the same with like race and pop punk. Pop punk is like so white.
Totally.
And so anytime there's somebody doing something different with race and gender and queerness and music, which is happening more and more across genres, they put value on that, not just for the sake of it, but also because their perspectives are often more nuanced in what they write about. It's just offering more to the conversation than the same old like 4 stock standard white boys, you know? And I definitely try to do that in my music with like talking about the queer experience as much as like anything else. And I think that has really translated into our audiences, because I think pop punk audiences often there were a lot of like queer folk. Yeah, and especially because a lot of those audiences are teenagers as well, and they're at that really sensitive stage where they are trying to figure out, is it okay if I want to be different, or do I have to put myself in one of these 2 boxes? Yeah, totally. And it's just interesting that even though all these bands were so like homogenous, that the audiences weren't reflecting that. The audiences were much more diverse, and so it's nice to kind of see that changing. Cool. And as like a front woman, have you ever experienced any kind of like discrimination at all, or any just ridiculous things where you feel like you're not respected because of who you are, like because you're not a white dude with a dick, or? I think one of the things I think about is that my gender affects my experience and affects the way that people interact with me, and it affects how my music is received. But also people who are like cisgender men, it affects their experience too, but they don't know that it's happening. So the difference is like people often like will ask you about like, oh, how does your gender affect your experience, and you're thinking about it all the time and you're aware of it. But one of the sort of like privileges that you have when you're not a minority is just thinking that it's not affecting your experience when it is, and that I would just like to see more you know, white people and men and cisgender folk being asked to examine like how those things are actually affecting. Because it's like it's positively affecting them, because they don't realise the opportunities and stuff that they get. Like they just think that's the default experience, 100%. And then we experience maybe less cool stuff, as opposed to thinking, no, everyone has an experience, but yours is always positive because of who you are. And they think about their struggles. Because you're gonna focus on the things that disadvantage you more than the things that advantage you, and that's the whole, you know, constantly examining privilege. But I feel like part of making things move forward isn't just like talking about how when you're a minority that affects your experience, but actually asking for that to be spoken about more widely. That's cool. So moving forward, like with your artistry and your band, do you think that you'll focus more on, you know, the queer experience and the woman's experience? Do you feel like you have any sort of agenda to communicate that with your audiences, or are you just kind of like, it's not really a thing that crosses your mind? No, I definitely think about it. Partly when we first started to get a little bit more successful, I wasn't really like out yet. And there's a part of me that's going, okay, well, I don't know if I should talk about this, if this is gonna you know, compromise some of the opportunities I'm getting. And you feel like scared, like, is this label going to want to sign us, or are people going to be scared of this thing that, especially being like non-binary, that is quite new to the mainstream, and people don't know what it is. But then after I did talk about it, and I realized how much of a positive thing that can be for the people who listen to your music, and so many of them like come up to you and thank you for being out, and thank you for wearing the trans symbol on your t-shirt, and what it means to them. It's like you can't not do that. It's always got to be part of it. And why else are we really making music? Like, there's lots of little things, but the way you connect with people and the way you help people, the way that people helped you when you were listening to music, when you were watching people who were trans, or you know, just be out and be confident in who they are and say, like, it's okay, this is part of me, but it's not my whole story. I'm still a musician and I'm doing my thing, and that can be for you as well. What's that? What's that? What's going on here?